Hi, well today I thought that I would show you how to do some mosaic and we can have a little bit of fun with that. So let me give you some explanations about what mosaic is and isn't. Mosaic is taking a series of different components, in this case tiles, and putting them together to create a picture or an image. So mosaic is not simply limited to mosaic tiles. You could do it with broken china, you could do it with lentils, you could do it with beads, you could do it with buttons. The sky is really the limit. So it's putting together these different components to create an image, and there are wonderful examples of this all over the world. Today I'm going to be working on an MDF or superwood cutout, and this is a wood that doesn't like water too much, so be careful about getting a lot of water on this because it's going to affect it and might make it warp. But for the water that we're going to add ultimately into the grout, it's not going to affect it. Your mosaic tiles come in different formats. So some of them, like these metallic ones, come on a mesh background. And if you're wanting to get these off, it's very easy. You can just peel them off by hand. Others of them come on a gum tape backing. And for these, sometimes you can just pull them off like that. It does leave a little bit of gum paper on the top, but don't worry about that. That will come off. Or if you have a big sheet of them, then you could just put them in some water and this gum tape will release the tiles quite quickly. So with some of the tiles, you're going to find that the back is actually fairly smooth, like this one. But others, like these tiny little ones, have these ridges. I don't know if you can see those. So you get the smooth backed ones and you get the ridged ones. And you do need to make sure that you get it right, otherwise you're going to find it difficult to work with. So if I was going to work on a design like a wooden cutout like this that has a curve, I would simply start by working from the outside edge, because it's far easier to get your spacing correct if you start on the outside and work inwards, because you can cut your tiles. But when you are working from the inside outwards, it's more and more difficult. So here I'm just using random reds, and you will see that there are a few different kinds of reds, just to get an idea of how many tiles I'm going to need, whether I'm going to cut them or not. And you will continue with this until it goes all the way and covers your board. You could use some of these little glitter tiles, which are very small, but they've got sparkles in them. You could use some of those to create an accent, maybe up at the top here of some sort, maybe a little diamond. You could play around and just have a lot of fun. The trouble with mosaic is that you can have so much fun that you keep playing. I normally, on a smaller item, would leave my tiles like this and simply pick one up, glue it, and put some glue on, and then put it back in position. But for a bigger design, you could trace this shape onto a piece of paper, and you could lay your tiles out there if you found it easier to work with. So for now, I'm just going to put these aside because I've got another one here where I've actually stuck down most of the tiles. So if you have a look here, you can see that most of the tiles have been stuck down. I had little areas here where the tiles just left a gap, so I cut some small tiles to fit in there. And when you come to stick these mosaic tiles down, you want to work with a wood glue or a craft glue, PVA glue, on a porous surface like this. So for any absorbent surface, which is wood or thick card of some sort, depending on what you're working with, a wood glue will actually suffice. When you come to work on glass, it's different. And what I normally do is put some of my glue onto a little saucer, and then I just take a sucker stick and put a dab of glue on the back, and then I would position this carefully so that it lines up. It's not a serious thing if there's a little bit of glue seeping through on the sides like that, because that is going to dry clear, and once you've actually put your grout in, which is where the gaps are, you're not going to actually see that. So I did this one ahead of time because it is important before you start to grout that all these tiles are secured so that they don't shift around while you're working. And I've got only one tile here that I'm going to need to watch. So what I have now for the next step is some tile grout. This is just normal grout that you would find in the hardware store, and you use it in bathrooms and kitchens when you're tiling. So it is regular grout. Then you want to add to that a little bit of water. And my suggestion is that you go slightly slowly with this. You don't want to find that you've mixed up a very sloppy mixture and then you've got to add more of the grout powder, and you end up with a bucket full of stuff that you actually don't need in the end. So I've got here about maybe 50 grams of grout that I'm just mixing with water, and you want it to be a smooth but a fairly stiff consistency, because you don't want it to run out from the grout that you're putting from in between the tiles. So the grout will start to absorb the moisture as you leave it to stand, and normally if I was teaching a class, I would let everybody just give maybe about 5 minutes so that the water has a chance to absorb all the powder and be, you know, nice consistency. But I'm just going to press on for now. What you don't want to find is that you've got lumps here, so you need to work those out. And then once you've got it mixed in nicely, and you can already see that it's not looking as sloppy as it was just a few seconds ago. Can you see that? It's a fairly nice consistency. You're going to work with it. So you want it like a thick pouring cream. Okay? And that's a good consistency to work with. So now I'm going to start by just putting some of this onto my mosaic, and it's going to look a right mess because it's going to cover everything. And don't worry about that. The idea is here that you want the grout to get in between the tiles and to fill up these little grooves. So by starting in the center, I can just use my sucker stick to smooth it all over. And remember, the color of your grout will be the color that's between the tiles. So quite often I would work with a black grout, which is very dramatic, and it will give a nice effect, especially when you've got very bright tiles. But you could work with a dove gray, you get sort of cream colored grout. So depending on what you're working with in terms of your design, you could choose a grout color to fix it. The other thing is that you can use powder paints as a color for grout. If you mix them, dry powder paints into the dry grout before you start, but you will always get a pastel color because the grout itself is white, so it will act like a white paint. Okay, so I want to cover completely all over this design. I'm very aware of my little tile that I stuck down at the end here last, so I will correct that just before we finish up here. And then when you've got it in between all the tiles, all the way around, you need to start working on the edges. So I'm going to let this just sit a little bit on the top because I don't want to have any gaps, but I'm going to use what's on the top now to start working around the edges on the side, because I do need to fill in these little gaps on the side here. You can see these little gaps around the edge because otherwise they're going to look rather ugly. Okay, I'm doing this over my container because I want any little drips to fall into the container if possible. Just smooth this along, keep working at it. Ideally my mixture could have maybe stood for another minute or two, but it's not too serious. Right, so you're going to continue working all the way like this, and you will see now that these edges are starting to look neat and smooth. Can you see that? Right, so I'm going to come up to the top where I've got these pebbles, and that's a little bit more tricky because I want to fill in these gaps around here as well, like so, all the way around, and this last little bit here. Right, so then what I'm going to do is just to take a piece of an old store card, and I'm going to use that just to scrape off some of the excess that's sitting on the surface of my mosaic design. I have picked up a little bit of the grout underneath, but don't worry, I will just wipe that off before I set this aside. Anything that comes off the side here, you can scrape away with a store card. You want to work with this just skimming it over the surface of the tiles, not digging it in so it's pulling up the grout that's in between the tiles, because that would be a disaster. And where possible, get as much of the grout off the tiles at this stage as you can. It just makes it slightly easier when you come to clean up. Now what you would do is the next step is just to leave this to dry, and you're going to need to leave it to dry for a little while, depending on how thickly you've got it and how many tiles you've got. So maybe about 2 hours, and then you can come back with a sponge and just gently wipe away some of this excess so that you reveal the tiles. And then when it's completely dry, 100%, then you can come back with a wet cloth and simply wipe away that little excess that's on top of the tiles. So there's a super little project to do, very, very easy. Wooden cutouts are freely available. And yeah, I just need to go and clean up my messy fingers now before I can carry on. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Bye for now.